We, the People of Detroit, is dedicated to community coalition building and to the provision of resources that inform, train, and mobilize the citizens of Detroit and beyond to improve their quality of life. As a community-based grassroots organization, We the People of Detroit aim to inform, educate, and empower Detroit residents on imperative issues surrounding civil rights, land, water, education, and the democratic process. For more information, call 844-42-WATER, 844-42-WATER, or email wethepeopleofdetroit.com.
Wake up, Detroit. I'm Joanne Watson, and this is your wake-up call.
When a brown girl child is born, the earth shifts. The sun is at half-mast. The moon waits for her first cry. The ancestors set the table. The flowers turn red as blood. This is your land, continent daughter, with tree trunk legs and branches for arms. This is your soil, black and fertile as your eyes facing an apartheid Jim Crow current past memory. Some of us begin the removal of shackles at birth. We grow into the armor of struggle quickly. We brew courage in our tea, blend bravery into our Sunday dinners. Joanne Watson, you understand nation building is not a part-time job. This dedicated life is sometimes lonely, a vulnerable choice, but it is the only way you know how to operate. You are wired for the movement in your black women bones, even when tired, still fighting, still organizing, still singing morning spirituals. You were born to lead, even in your own family, the eldest of 10 children born to Jefferson and Lestine. You made Damon, Nefertari, Stephen, Maya. Her children always knew she was larger than life. When you are a woman in the movement, you take the children with you on the journey. You bring the babies with you to your college classes. When you travel to Ghana for the first time, it will be with your daughters in tow. When you are a fearless, nationalist thinking mama, mothering never stops with your own babies. 30 godchildren and mentees across the globe. The daughter of a ministering mother is already ordained for good trouble. A seer, a prophetic young student preparing for her lifelong role as servant to her own community. When your purse was snatched in a Farmer Jack parking lot many years ago with your kids' tickets to Run DMC in the purse, you made sure they still got to that concert and even hosted Melly Mel and the Furious Five in your living room, because queens make it look easy. When you were a single mom, people would tell you what you can't do. Instead, you moved to New York City with all 4 of your C's to do your necessary work with the YWCA, because queens make it look easy. Ghana, Togo, South Africa, where is your heart, Mama Watson? Nurturing spirit, baking melt in your mouth, homemade biscuits. How many hours do you sleep, Warrior Watson, with endless work ethic and blue-collar blood racing through your veins? How do we say thank you for your work, your time, your heart? We know you will never really retire. There is a fire on the path to freedom. There is smoke, there is sacrifice, there are stories of justice, of women, of Tubman, Sojourner, of Angela, Asada, Coretta, and Merle, and Betty, and Queen Mother Moore. Some of us know we are ancient, that our marrow is laced with legacy, that we are here to bring light to our daughters. Sometimes it just takes one woman, a mother, a grandmother, a Spitfire, griot, a sister, the only woman to lead the NAACP's largest chapter. She, daughter of the movement, of Rosa, of Irma. She was a birth that gave birth to possibility for other young activists like me, a true D woman, frontline Fatima, Nigerian blood, councilwoman, leader, truth teller, Joanne Watson, social worker, president of the Anti-Klan Network, sister, inspiration, dedicated to the protection of girls and the voices of women wrapped in West African beauty, regal and resilient. Wake up, Detroit. Wake up, South Africa. Wake up, Cuba. Wake up, small business owners. Wake up, White House. Wake up, reparations. Wake up, teachers. Wake up, women. Wake up, schools. Sleeping is not an option when the Honorable Joanne Watson is in the room.
Wake up, Detroit. I'm Joanne Watson, and this is your wake-up call, waking you up today to talk about reparations. Now, this day, today, April 13th at 4 o'clock p.m., there's going to be the first meeting of the Reparations Task Force in the Coleman A. Young Municipal Center in the 13th floor, which is the Irma L. Henderson Auditorium inside of the Coleman A. Young Municipal Center. And 4 o'clock is the time of that meeting. There will be a public comment section. And you are invited. The people of Detroit voted for reparations to become a commission or a task force, to become an entity pursued by city officials in order to provide recompense, compensation for Detroiters who have been disenfranchised, who have been relieved of their assets down through the years. So this is an issue that responds to your vote. The reparations vote got more votes than any people on the ballot. So that means it's a priority. It's important to you. You should come down and speak in public comment this afternoon at 4 o'clock on the 13th floor of the Coleman A. Young Municipal Center and the Irma L. Henderson Auditorium. You should come. The issues surrounding reparations for Detroit would include paying back the excessive taxes that were assessed to the people of Detroit, causing many to lose their homes, to lose their assets, to move. There is a need to have that money returned to the citizens who were overassessed. They need to have their money back. Why not give their money back now? There are many, many issues that relate to disenfranchisement that need to be addressed, including the decimation of Black Bottom. 350 black businesses were decimated, bulldozed, eliminated in the so-called urban renewal era of the Eisenhower administration. That disenfranchisement, the removal of all those black businesses and black homes and black people who lived and patronized and had a community surrounded by Black Bottom and Paradise Valley. Those businesses, which is very well chronicled, by the way, in the autobiography of the Honorable Irma L. Henderson down through the years, and in the autobiography of the Honorable Coleman Alexander Young. Straight, hard stuff. The significance of that act has never been addressed. It has never been the subject of remediation. As a matter of fact, the Honorable Irma L. Henderson told me with her own mouth that at the time that Black Bottom was decimated, black citizens were promised by those who thought they were in charge that they would rebuild, that they would reestablish those businesses. They didn't do that. They just waited for people to leave here. They didn't do that. There are a number of issues surrounding the citizens of Detroit, including hospitals. Did you know Detroit used to be the mecca of black doctors and black attorneys in this country? There were more black doctors in Detroit and black attorneys in Detroit than any other city in this country. That helped to provide the backdrop for 19 black hospitals that used to be in Detroit. Those 19 black hospitals have been whittled down from 19 to 0. Reparations. I was born in a black hospital. Those black hospitals have been forced to merge. Black doctors were not treated with respect. If you don't know the story of Dr. Ocean Sweet, you should. It's a good history lesson for your family and for yourself. I listed 20-plus issues that I thought should be priorities. I'm just one person on that task force, and I wouldn't be on the task force, quite frankly, if it were not for the wonderful Monica Lewis Patrick, the CEO of We the People of Detroit, which is a sponsor of this program, by the way. We thank God for We the People of Detroit. Monica Lewis Patrick was asked to serve, and she told them that she would recommend Joanne Watson, who has far more reparations experience than she does. So I'm grateful to Monica for the recommendation. They the issue of reparations is not something everybody understands, but you should know that the roots of the modern-day reparations movement are founded right here in Detroit. It's Detroit. It's Detroit. It was Detroit where reparations, Ray Jenkins, who was a great realtor, a real estate activist, businessman, who had always been a supporter of reparations. And when he realized that the Japanese Americans had been able to achieve in 1989 receiving $20,000 each and a letter of apology from the U.S. government, he began to follow Congressman John Conyers around the city when the congressman was in office, and he told Congressman Conyers, you need to do legislation calling for reparations for people of African descent. We need reparations for black folks. It's a dead old. That's what he said all the time. He followed Congressman Conyers around the city, and eventually Congressman Conyers said, you know, Ray, you're right. You're right. And the congressman introduced H.R. 40. That 40 stands for the 40 acres and a mule that was never provided, despite the promise, to the newly freed Africans who had been enslaved. The significance of reparations is also best understood when you look at the backdrop of this nation. The nation was doubled in size by the Louisiana Purchase. And guess what the president used to pay for the Louisiana Purchase that doubled the size of the United States? Profits from the slave trade. These were profits from the unpaid labor of Africans who were working from can't see in the morning to can't see at night, while being treated worse than animals. Kidnapped, raped, lynched, tortured, terrorized, and forced to provide revenue for those who didn't deserve it, for those who tell that lie that Africans sold themselves into slavery. Not true. The slave ships were built in the state of Rhode Island. It was building the slave ships. That was the economy of Rhode Island during that period. And the enslavement business of the United States helped build Wall Street, Brown University, Aetna Insurance. Many of the businesses that are seen as the foundation stone for the economy of this country got started from investing in the slave trade, which was inhumane. In 2001, the United Nations World Conference Against Racism ruled and determined that the transatlantic slave trade was a crime against humanity and should always have been so. It was a crime against humanity and should always have been. When there's a crime, there ought to be a remedy for that crime. What is the remedy? Reparations. 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 Remember what happened in Black Wall Street in Oklahoma. Black businesses by the dozens were operating with a significant degree of dignity and power and economic equity when, without warning, those black businesses and the people who lived in the black neighborhoods in that area, that Greenwood area around Tulsa, Oklahoma, that area was bombed. Bombed, attacked, terrorized. People of African descent were killed. Many of them were forced to leave Oklahoma, but many of them were just killed, annihilated. It was a massacre. It was genocide. Just one example. Just one example of the lawlessness and the racism that has impacted people of African descent, that makes reparations an issue whose time has come, whose time has long ago come, is way overdue. And there is a wonderful book called Should America Pay, edited by Dr. Ray Wimbush, who was the director of urban studies at Morgan State University in Baltimore. I wrote a chapter in that book with Congressman Conyers, and so did about 40 other folks write chapters about various issues of the reparations movement. That book cites all the other groups who have received reparations. Do you know that those who lost the Civil War received reparations? The Confederates received reparations to compensate them for their, quote, losses. See, there's some black people walking around saying, I don't want no reparations. Don't say that. You don't even understand who you are. You don't understand what is owed to you. It's not a handout. It's a debt owed. It is a debt owed. If Numbers 5:5 in the Old Testament says that when someone owes you something and they want to acknowledge that debt and pay back, they should pay that back plus a fifth thereof. Plus a fifth thereof. Reparations. Gaidi Obedelli, the late Reverend Milton Henry, often cited that passage when he was doing his reparations sermons. We thank God for reparations activists like Reverend Milton Henry, the wonderful Richard Henry, who was also known as Dr. Amari Obedelli. We thank God for reparations Ray Jenkins, who put reparations on the front burner all of his life. He did that as a volunteer, as one of the co-founders of NCOBRA, the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America. There are critical issues surrounding reparations that longtime residents of Detroit already know about. You already know about disenfranchisement, assets that have been seized and taken. You already know about Black Bottom. I know you know. Many of you know about the black hospitals that used to exist. Some of you know that there still is not equity in businesses. We are 80 to 90% of the population in this city, yet own less than 2% of the businesses here. Less than 2%. Outrageous. Outrageous. Inequitable. Disparate. And it's deliberate. It's deliberate. There is an unwritten code as it relates to businesses that get support for new starts and development. If you are black from the community, have paid your dues here, gone to school here, it's almost impossible to get the kind of development resources that you are entitled to based on what is given to every other group and every other population. People have to make it on their own. That Linwood Fresh Market that just opened up on Linwood and Glendale with a wonderful young woman, Sonia Green. She went to Downtown Development Authority. She went to the Community Development Block Grant. She went to CBDA. She went to all those alphabet soup groups seeking support, and they told her she didn't qualify. So she had to use money from her own home, from her own personal assets to open that store because those who should have helped did not help. Did not help. One of my godsons years ago, many years ago, was opening up a barbershop and a soul food restaurant in an area that had nothing else on it. There was nothing else on the street, no other businesses, no enterprises. And when he was going through the process of getting city approval for his operation, at one point he got to somebody in the bureaucracy who told him that he had to pay for 33 years worth of sign licenses. Now he was just buying the building that season. Why should he have to pay for 33 years worth of sign licenses because nobody else had paid it in 33 years? That's the kind of stuff that, of course, the person who told him that on the 4th floor of City Hall didn't know that that young man could come right up to the 13th floor and tap me on the shoulder where I was sitting on the city council table and ask me to please come down and see if I might be able to help him. I helped him. I certainly did. And the gentleman was embarrassed and acted like he developed amnesia. He said, "Oh, well, I wasn't trying to hurt him. I was just trying to tell him that something was owed from the past years." I said, "Well, it's not owed by him. This is how you all keep our people out of business. This is exactly what you just didn't know he knew somebody that was on the 13th floor. And I want you all to stop practicing this apartheid activity that only helps certain people operate businesses in the city of Detroit." I want to invite you to the Reparations Task Force first meeting, which is today, April 13th, Thursday, April 13th at 4 o'clock on the 13th floor of the Coleman A. Young Municipal Center in the Ermel Henderson Auditorium. It's important that you let your voice be heard. There's going to be a public comment section of that meeting. I'm just one part of the group. I don't determine everything that is going to happen, but the citizens who voted for it, you voted for it. So you should come and remind those persons who are on the task force that we are the reasons you are. You're only here because we voted. We gave this issue more votes than we gave to people who were running for office. And we have priorities that we want you to honor. To put that on the front burner and do that today, if you'd be so kind. That'd be wonderful. We're going to take a short break, and we shall return right after this. Wake up, Detroit!
The Detroit Water and Sewerage Department is looking for motivated Detroiters to be a part of our team. We have opportunities for field services technicians, engineers, and customer service specialists with competitive pay and benefits. Make a real difference with the work you do every day. Join other Detroiters who are taking part protecting the pipes where we live, work, and play. Learn more and apply at detroitmi.gov/jobs. DWSD, working hard for you.
Muscles, joints, or feet tired, achy, or distressed? Tried everything? Ringmaster Rubbing Oil is a vintage topical pain reliever, trusted for over 70 years, with a rich formula for the treatment of stubborn aches and pains. Packaged in a glass bottle for purity, our liquid can also be used in warm water for foot soaks and compresses. A little goes a long way. Try our time-tested formula, available in several sizes.
Make a donation to WHBR-TV and receive two 2-ounce bottles of Ringmaster Rubbing Oil for $25. Call 313-868-6612.
Justice for Mario Willis. Truth. Facts. Evidence. Matter. Log into justiceformariowillis.com. Read for yourself.
Wake up, Detroit. We are back, and once again, reparations is on the front burner. Reparations, which had a whole lot of foundation, the current reparations movement in the city of Detroit. You should be proud that the H.R. 40, the reparations legislation, was introduced by a Detroiter named John Conyers, and at the behest of a Detroiter named Reparations Ray Jenkins. You know, I gave Reparations Ray Jenkins that name, Reparations Ray. He used to call when I was on the radio. I was on WCHB, then WGPR, and then WHPR. Reparations Ray would call every day. Every day, people talked about law enforcement abuse. They talked about black business. I had Dr. Claude Anderson on regularly, Dick Gregory. Reparations Ray always had one issue. He'd call in, he'd say, Joanne, we need reparations now. It's not a handout, it's a debt owed. That was his everyday mantra. Reparations is not a handout, it's a debt owed. He was a cousin of Martha Jean Queen. People don't know that. That was his cousin, Martha Jean Queen. Reparations Ray Jenkins was an absolute standout supporter of the reparations movement one who also raised money for the national reparations movement for attorneys who were pursuing litigation. So he understood that you need litigation and legislation like H.R. 40 and agitation. You need to be able to get into the street to demand. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has and it never will, Frederick Douglass. One of the things that Reparations Ray did was build a momentum in the city. We had rallies in churches and community groups and organizations. We also, at one point, we sent, when I was the director of the NAACP decades ago, we actually sent Reparations Ray as a delegate to work the floor of an NAACP convention so that reparations could be approved by the national NAACP. And you know that worked? Reparations worked that floor like he was at a political convention and got an emergency resolution passed that the national NAACP was going to be supporting reparations, H.R. 40, and compensation for our people. But reparations has been provided for other populations, and that is well described in the book I mentioned earlier, Should America Pay, that you can access through Amazon. Should America Pay, edited by Dr. Ray Wimbush, talks about the role of women, African women who had been enslaved, and helping to develop a segment of the MD profession, OBGYN. Did you know that black women were used as the practice models for C-sections by gynecologists who did not give them any anesthesia while they were practicing the C-sections? Black women. So the medical profession owes our people. Did you know that the insurance agencies got started initially from insuring the bodies of those who were kidnapped and enslaved? Keep in mind, Africans were not waving their hand on the west coast of Africa saying, "Come get me." They were kidnapped at gunpoint. And any village chief who tried to stand in the way of the kidnapping and the theft, the grand theft, they were beheaded. They were beheaded, they were slain, they were assassinated by these who decided they needed to have profits. Profits that were developed by Africans doing this work without getting any compensation at all, and under threat of terrorism, lynching, and torture, and rapes, being drawn and quartered. They would tie the four limbs of our people to four horses and run them in different directions. There was great, horrific terrorism going on during that period. They were not, our people weren't sitting around plantations singing songs, "I wish I was in Dixie." No! They were absolutely prisoners of war. That was war that happened, and most of our people don't even understand the level of indignity and torture and terrorism that was inflicted on people of African descent. And to have to still be fighting the same fight after all these years, after our people didn't just build the South, they built this country. They built this country, including Detroit. It was Africans who put steeples on these Catholic churches that are in a vertical line in the city of Detroit. It was Africans. It was Africans, people of African descent, who helped create the wealth that is enjoyed by the auto industry with that $5 a day lure from the South. It was people of African descent who created the black middle class, who helped found the organized labor. Did you know that Dave Moore, one of the best friends of the Honorable Coleman Alexander Young, I love saying that name, Dave Moore was a co-founder of the UAW. Co-founder. He was a bad little brother, and it was the Honorable Coleman Alexander Young and Dave Moore who were the bodyguards to Paul Robeson when he came to Detroit, when Reverend Charles Hill would invite Paul Robeson after Paul Robeson was treated so terribly by the United States that took away his visa and his passport, refused to allow him to practice his craft speaking and lecturing around the world because he was saying some rough stuff about the United States and its institutions of racism. He was not allowed to travel outside of the United States, but he was always welcome in Detroit. And his bodyguards were the Honorable Coleman A. Young before he was honorable, and Dave Moore, co-founder of the UAW. It was Dave Moore who picked up Mother Rosa Parks when she first arrived in Detroit from Montgomery, Alabama. She had to come to Detroit where her brother lived because her life and her husband's life were threatened in Montgomery, Alabama. She was not allowed to go back to her job with any dignity and peace. She was fired and threatened. Her life was threatened, just like Dr. King's life was threatened. She came to Detroit in order to seek some level of peace and employment, recompense. Her life was threatened, her husband's life was threatened, and her mother's life was threatened. They all moved here to Detroit. Praise God for the Honorable John Conyers, who hired our Queen Mother, Rosa Louise Parks, and provided not only compensation, a modest compensation, but also provided a front row to the movement, because Conyers was in everything. Of course, he was a sponsor of H.R. 40 and was the person who led brain trust sessions at the Congressional Black Caucus every year. I was blessed to be able to help him provide panels for that reparations panel every year. And his staff in the judiciary got so accustomed to me calling my friends and asking them to speak on the panel that they just assumed I would do it even when I was no longer on his staff and was on the city council. I was still filling up the panel for Congressman Conyers' reparations brain trust at the Congressional Black Caucus. And you need to also know that the Congressional Black Caucus was founded by another Detroiter, Congressman Charles Diggs. His name does not get mentioned enough. Congressman Charles Diggs was the one who had the idea and the concept and pushed and pioneered the Congressional Black Caucus. That was Congressman Diggs from Detroit. When Congressman Charles Diggs and Congressman John Conyers went to Congressman Adam Clayton Powell to tell them about the idea of a Congressional Black Caucus, I was told by Conyers that Adam Clayton Powell leaned back in his chair in his congressional office, took a puff on his cigar and said, "Y'all don't need a Congressional Black Caucus, you got me." Congressman Charles Diggs said, "I think we're going to pursue the Congressional Black Caucus anyway, Congressman Adam Clayton Powell," and we're so glad he did. We're so glad he did. But it was Congressman Charles Diggs from Detroit who founded the Congressional Black Caucus. Co-founder, Congressman John Conyers, who was the dean of the Congressional Black Caucus until he left here. The significance of reparations and the fact that Detroit has voted for a reparations task force commission should be on your front burner today. The first meeting of the reparations task force will happen at 4 o'clock today in the Coleman A. Young Municipal Center on the 13th floor of the Irma L. Henderson Auditorium. That 13th floor, Irma L. Henderson Auditorium, will be the scene of the meeting, and it's at 4 o'clock today, April 13th. You should be a part of that meeting, not only to listen, but also to speak in public comment. Speak in public comment and let the members of that task force know why you voted for reparations. This issue received more votes than any people in the last election. That signifies that it's a priority for this city. The city where thousands of people were over-assessed taxes, property taxes, and they deserve to have those overpayments, those over-assessments returned to them, recompense, reimburse. People deserve to have their money repaid. Did you know that Detroiters are paying retail for their water bill, retail rates, while the suburban customers are only paying wholesale rates. Did you know that? That's been going on for generations. It's apartheid to have Detroiters paying retail rates for a water system they paid for in the first place. It was Detroit citizens who paid a bond to cover the cost of the water system, the best water system in the world. And then to have the citizens who own it also being forced to pay retail, and we know the difference between retail and wholesale. Detroiters are paying retail rates while the suburban customers are only paying wholesale rates. Now their municipalities and townships tack on a surcharge so the citizens in these other towns don't recognize that Detroit is only charging them wholesale because their own little cities are charging them an upcharge on what they pay in their households. But that has nothing to do with us. Detroiters own it. We should not be paying retail while the suburban customers are paying wholesale. And when you look at the power outages and how Detroiters and so many others have been disenfranchised by DTE with these power outages because they've not been taking care of the overgrowth on the lines and not handling the business that should be handled to keep us in the flow as it relates to electricity. Detroit needs to restore its public lighting department. There was no rationale for eliminating a public lighting department, getting rid of a utility that could be used to provide services to all your citizens. Who in their right mind would get rid of a utility that you own, where the infrastructure is already set up for providing public lighting? Just as the city provides water, the city should provide public lighting for its citizens and provide some competition for DTE. They shouldn't have a monopoly. Not when a city owns a public lighting department. We want to remind you of the importance of doing our homework. Do you really know how many assets of the city residents have been disenfranchised from down through the years? Detroiters have had assets taken, have had opportunities taken, have had over-assessments, have had institutions eliminated, like those 19 black hospitals, Black Bottom, 350 black businesses that were demolished by the government. Demolished, decimated, on the claim that it was urban development, urban renewal. No, it wasn't urban renewal, it was Negro removal. We know what it was. Our people have a right to reparations, not just nationally, but locally here in the city of Detroit, which also should include repairing the image of a city, because the bankruptcy was illegal in the city of Detroit. How can you be bankrupt when you have a water department worth $60 billion? That was an illegal act designed to rob people of their pension assets, designed to rob people of their right to gain revenue that is due to the city. During the bankruptcy period, the so-called emergency manager declared that the state of Michigan was forgiven from paying the city the revenue sharing, $731 million in revenue sharing that was due to the city of Detroit. $731 million was declared waived. You don't have to pay that back. Disrespect. Yes, you do have to pay it back. Revenue sharing doesn't come from the state. It was given from the federal government to the state on the premise that it would deliver and allocate those resources to its municipalities, to its cities. The state of Michigan did not do that, and it still needs to do that. Still needs to do reparations. Reparations. Our citizens should be able to go to college free. They should be able to go to college of their choice for free. Reparations. Reparations. They should be able to access certain resources without having to jump through hoops because of the inequities and the disparities that have been institutionalized in the past. It is important for you to show up tonight. Show up tonight and come in on time to the 13th floor of the Coleman A. Young Municipal Center in the Honorable Ermel Henderson Auditorium at 4 o'clock for the first meeting of the Reparations Task Force. Come to the meeting and sign up for public comment. Be a part of those who speak and to talk about what you expect, what you are expecting, what you are looking for, why you voted for reparations in numbers exceeding 80% at the ballot box. Talk about that because it's all about you. It's the citizens who voted for this reparations task force, and it should respond to your priorities and to your determination. If there was ever a city that ought to have a made-up mind about reparations, it ought to be Detroit. It ought to be this city. This city where Reparations Ray Jenkins was the catalyst for moving Congressman John Conyers to even sponsor a reparations bill. That bill was finally approved by the House of Representatives, but never got approved by the Senate. So it is still a law waiting in the wings to become. Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee from Texas inherited that legislation from the congressman when he left office. And there's also a companion bill, a Senate bill sponsored by Senator Cory Booker, so that there can be a House of Representatives legislation and a Senate legislation that can be both approved. But given the current makeup, the demographics of the U.S. Senate, it's certainly not likely during this season. What is possible, however, is an executive order. An executive order is what Abraham Lincoln used to sign off on the Emancipation Proclamation. He did that as an executive order. Anytime the Congress is not in session, the president has a right to do an executive order. Did you know that? Yes, he does. He has a right to do an executive order. So this president, who is in office to a large degree because of the support of people who look like you and me, ought to be pushed to do an executive order, not by putting his finger up in the air and seeing which way the wind is blowing, but because it would be recompense for those who helped put him in office. There is recompense due people of African descent who ought to decide that we're worth it, who ought to feel that you are owed something because of what your ancestors did, and not just 246 years ago, but right now. There is still, look at the young man who got expelled from their legislative positions just days ago and had to be put back in office by a vote of city council after some racists decided that they didn't have a right to protest the guns that are too rampant in this society. People have a right to protest society's embrace of guns and protect these children and families who've lost loved ones. We've lost too many people because of the lawlessness of guns and the violence that is so rampant. Look at how many mass shootings we've already had. in 2023. It's a disgrace before God. And these two young men and others who stood up to demand that something be changed were subject to expulsion, removal from their office, because they dared to stand up. You know they would not have done that if they were not young black men. It would not have happened. It would not have happened. It would not have occurred if they did not look the way they look, talk the way they talk, holding their fists up in the air, just like the brothers did in the '68 Olympics. We're going to take a short break, and we shall return right after this. Reparations Now.
This is Bruce Simpson, your City of Detroit Ombudsman. I am here to address all of your complaints and concerns. If you need assistance regarding city services, please contact my office at 313-224-6000 or contact us via email at ombudsman@detroitmi.gov. This is Bruce Simpson, your City of Detroit Ombudsman.
At the Detroit Water and Sewerage Department, we're working hard to protect pipes by cleaning public sewer lines to reduce flooding and speeding up the replacement of lead service lines. Protect your pipes with 3 easy tips. Pour grease into containers, toss wipes in the trash can, and check for running toilets, leaky pipes, and dripping faucets. For more tips, go to detroitmi.gov/protect pipes. DWSD, working hard to protect pipes for you.
Justice for Mario Willis. Truth. Facts. Evidence. Matter. Log into justiceformariowillis.com. Read for yourself.
I'm Wayne County Treasurer Eric Sabri. We are living through unprecedented times with a global pandemic now approaching its 3rd year. As a result, the Michigan Homeowner Assistance Fund was created. This fund, administered by the state of Michigan, is designed to help homeowners cope with pandemic-related hardships, such as delinquent property taxes. To see if you qualify, please visit. Call 313-388-9799 or email taxinfo@waynecounty.com. We're here to help.
We at Watkins Broadcasting care about the health and safety of our viewers and listeners. During this novel coronavirus pandemic, please protect yourself and others. Wash your hands well and often. Avoid touching your face. Cough and sneeze into your sleeve. Practice social distancing. Stay at least 6 feet away from others when in public and only leave the house when it's essential. Stay safe. You are important to us.
We, the people of Detroit, is dedicated to community coalition building and to the provision of resources that inform, train, and mobilize the citizens of Detroit and beyond to improve their quality of life. As a community-based grassroots organization, we, the people of Detroit, aim to inform, educate, and empower Detroit residents on imperative issues surrounding civil rights, land, water, education, and the democratic process. For more information, call 844-42-WATER, 844-42-WATER, or email wethepeopleofdetroit.com.
Wake up, Detroit. I'm Joanne Watson, and this is your wake-up call. Wake up, Detroit. I'm Joanne Watson. This is your wake-up call. We thank God for We the People of Detroit, our sponsor. We thank God for all of you who are watching, listening, and supporting this wonderful station, Black-owned station. We thank God for this opportunity to come to you on an important, critical issue, one that you have voted for in the city of Detroit, and that's reparations. It was the city of Detroit electors who determined that there ought to be a reparations task force. That task force was appointed by the city council, and the first meeting will be held this evening, Thursday, April 13th at 4 o'clock in the Coleman A. Young Municipal Center on the 13th floor in the Irma L. Henderson Auditorium. There will be a public comment section during the meeting. You should sign up to speak in public comment. And don't be afraid to talk about critical issues important to you. Those things you know are due to you. If you want to talk about the fact that your family was over-assessed taxes and people have now determined how much was over-assessed by the millions, tell them that you want this group to demand that there be repayment, compensation, reimbursement of that over-assessment. You shouldn't just take that. Should demand recompense. I heard somebody on television talking about they were going to spend $25 million to replace some broken sidewalks. I know something else that could use $25 million more than some broken sidewalks. Help me, somebody. There are critical issues that require recompense, reimbursement, that require addressing the disenfranchisement that has historically been existing as it relates to black people in the city of Detroit. Even though we're 80 to 90% of the population, we don't own 80 to 90% of the businesses. We own about 1.5%. That's because conditions and policies are still not in favor of ownership. People have grown accustomed and assumed that they had the right to keep our people in roles as patrons, as customers, not as owners. You have the right to own. You know who says that very well? Dr. Claude Anderson, Black Labor, White Wealth. Black Labor, White Wealth, and Powernomics. Dr. Claude Anderson, who went to Wayne State University. Yes, he did. Went to Wayne State University and got a degree and has many family members. He and his wife, Joanne, had many family members in the city of Detroit. We thank God for Dr. Claude Anderson, one of the great architects of the reparations movement. We thank God for Dr. Claude Anderson. We thank God for the roots and the history of Detroit as it relates to this issue of reparations. It is not a brand new issue for Detroiters. It's not a brand new issue in the nation. When you think about Sister Callie House who demanded that there be a pension fund for the newly freed Africans after the Emancipation Proclamation, she began organizing and developing a movement to demand for that pension to become a reality. Do you know what they did? They put her in jail under false charges of mail fraud, the same false charge they used for Marcus Garvey. Sister Callie House was put in jail because she had the right thoughts about what is owed to our people, people who had done the work and received nothing but torture, nothing but horrific mistreatment, nothing but lynchings and rapes and the kind of behavior that is decadent to humankind and to God. Callie House, look up the wonderful writings about Callie House. You need to know that. You need to know all that is noted in Should America Pay? A wonderful book, a book that provides a backdrop of how our people have provided the waymaker for the various industries that are currently part of the foundation of the economy in the United States of America. The United States of America didn't pull itself up by its bootstraps. That oft talked about mantra. The United States of America was lifted up, elevated by the unpaid labor of Africans. And certainly the size of the U.S. was doubled by the purchase of the Louisiana Purchase, which doubled the size of the United States. And reparations were given after the Civil War to the Confederates who lost the war. They got reparations. There were no reparations provided to the Africans. And do you know that it was black men who began fighting for the Union Army in the Civil War as a result of Frederick Douglass negotiating with Abraham Lincoln? Black men, African men, began to turn the tide so that the Union Army was winning the Civil War. So don't let anybody tell you that somebody else freed us. Black men, African men, helped turn the tide toward victory for the Union Army. So in many respects, not only did people of African descent double the size of the United States, they're responsible for the United States retaining its sovereignty as the United States of America. When African men became soldiers in the Union Army, the Union Army began to have victory after victory after victory. That story is not told in social studies books or textbooks. It's a wake-up call. Reparations. There's a meeting tonight, April 13th at 4 o'clock on the 13th floor of the Coleman A. Young Municipal Center. Please come and speak during public comment and talk about what you are expecting, what you are demanding for your reparations in the city of Detroit. Thank you for being with us today, and wake up, Detroit!
We, the people of Detroit, is dedicated to community coalition building and to the provision of resources that inform, train, and mobilize the citizens of Detroit and beyond to improve their quality of life. As a community-based grassroots organization, we, the people of Detroit, aim to inform, educate, and empower Detroit residents on imperative issues surrounding civil rights, land, water, education, and the democratic process. For more information, call 844-42-WATER, 844-42-WATER, or email wethepeopleofdetroit.com.